Hello ladies and gentlemen, what's up? Lucca here once again, and today we're going to talk about total chaos, the Nobel Prize, the presidency of the United States, dogs and cats, dumped bodies with a sad and dark past, and about power as well, right? And also because she may have possibly appeared in part 2 because she might have shown up and you didn't notice. And of course, today we'll also talk about Power's so-called racism. That's right, recently on Twitter a controversy started about Power because Fujimoto compared her to Eric Cartman, and then a whole discussion began about Power being racist. And I already wanted to start the video by getting this out of the way, but before that, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and also consider becoming a member for prices starting at just $1.99. That's right, it's cheaper than a cup of coffee. And shout out to all my dear members, you guys are awesome. And now let's get to the video. First of all, who is Power? Power is the character we know as a fiend of the Blood Devil. A fiend is a type of devil in the world of Chainsaw Man who ends up having to possess a human corpse as a last resort to survive. Because of this, the devil ends up becoming substantially weaker than it would be if it had possessed a living host at that moment. This is due to some limitations, since the devil probably doesn't fully control the host's brain. So yeah, Power is much weaker than she could be if she were a regular devil or in her normal form, as we see later on. But in the case of the Blood Devil's host, there's another interesting point to consider. Her past. Man, just stop and think about that. Power's body was found by the Blood Devil in a completely abandoned place, with no clothes and dirty as well. It's actually kind of heavy to think about what must have happened to her for a girl's body to be buried in some random forest and then possessed by the Blood Devil of all things. That definitely has some symbolism involving, well, blood from illicit acts. But this part is much more my interpretation of what might have happened than an established fact within the work. However, once again, Fujimoto doesn't care about explaining certain backstories in the work, as I've already mentioned here. He doesn't give many details, he just implies that something heavy happened and leaves the rest to the reader's imagination, just like what I mentioned about Rize's case and her past in the Soviet Union. Although, just thinking about Power's case, she was basically a pretty girl thrown into a forest without any clothes, so I think that's pretty self-explanatory, right? But yes, Power was the new identity created by the Blood Devil, a megalomaniac being with a strong personality who, despite everything, also has a more sensitive side. An interesting thing to consider is that devils are influenced in their decisions by the human brain of their host. Their personality and memories can end up affecting the way the devil thinks. It's quite possible that Power's sensitivity in taking in an animal, feeding it, and caring for Maui originally came from the human that the devil possessed. And little by little, the Blood Devil also learned to love and develop a more affectionate relationship with other beings. And now let's talk a bit about this whole relationship between dog and cat. Power's relationship with her cat is a great parallel for us to compare with Denji and Pochita's relationship. Power is very much like a cat, in the sense that she's extremely proud and acts like she owns the place. But whenever anything threatens her, she bolts away at full speed. Her personality really resonates with this more feline side, and that makes her better understand the fondness for these animals, unlike Denji, who has a completely opposite relationship because Pochita is a dog. This whole first arc of hers with the Bat Devil makes us like and hate the character at the same time. Power ends up having this effect on the audience. She is very playful and silly, while at the same time managing to be very annoying and treacherous in a really selfish and cowardly way. To like a character like this, so unstable, we always have to keep in mind that they are who they are and not a real person. So we always have that classic excuse, wow, this character would be unbearable in real life, but it's Power, so it's okay. It's like she gets a free pass to do the things she does, no matter how horrible they are. And still on this part involving Power's arc with the Bat Devil, this is a story with some loose ends like how did the Bat Devil get injured? We already find him bleeding from the loss of his arm when he meets Power, which is pretty strange and suspicious, but even at this early stage we already get a good sense of the Blood Devil's mentality. Power decides to trust another devil to save the cat. She prefers that over facing the Bat Devil directly with Denji. That's because she trusts her own demonic nature more than the human nature she's only recently come to know. Power is megalomaniacal, just like the Blood Devil. This egocentric nature focuses much more on her own demonic essence, always looking down on humans for being inferior from her point of view. Even though she was desperate for human help to save Maui, she still chose to betray the human and use him as a way to secure the Bat Devil's help. And that brings us to the topic that makes me fast forward this video quite a bit. Is Power racist? Well, since this topic came up on Twitter, I wanted to share my opinion on the matter. First, let's look at the facts. Yes, she does kind of have this discriminatory side. This is literally shown in the manga several times. However, it's not in the way people usually think when they hear the term racist. In the manga, we have this sequence here in Japanese that talks directly about this. However, the term used doesn't mean exactly racist, as it was translated. It's more of a term that means something against humans in general. The ideal translation would be something like misanthropy, which is a general hatred of humanity. And that fits much better with power's concept itself, and also causes much less confusion and controversy. The only downside is that it's a much less common term and way less funny, right? It's much less straightforward. Most people don't know it, so it sounds a lot weirder to hear, oh, she's a misanthrope. What would a misanthropic person be, you know? But yeah, power hates the human species as a whole. It's not just a matter of race, but rather a difference of species. Power's view of the human species is that we, as humans, are different from her, and Power, having been, well, the blood devil, loves herself above all else. So her ego basically rejects human beings for being different from her in the hierarchical order. And between us, that's something extremely normal among the devils in the world of Chainsaw Man. And yes, devils being, in quotes, racist towards humans is not a new theme at all. They are usually portrayed as being sadistic and evil, considering us inferior by default. For me, that's not and shouldn't be anything new, but Power's worldview changes a lot over time, and she also learns a lot from her experiences, gaining new perspectives on love and companionship. Little by little, she starts to change and leaves that misanthropic side behind. At least a little, right? But before we talk about her development, let's discuss a bit more about the power of the Blood Devil. In the world of Chainsaw Man, devils are stronger depending on how much fear their concept inspires in that world at a specific moment. This means that a concept can be more or less present at a certain time. A concept can be extremely powerful during a certain period in history, like the guillotine during the French Revolution. But nowadays, that instrument is no longer so present in the popular imagination, and the fear it inspires is much less than in the past. As a result, the power of that devil itself is noticeably reduced. In Power's case, she may have been nerfed by a civilization's time of peace, as well as by the very fact that her host is a corpse, right? Which makes her a hellish demon. Peace, the absence of blood caused by violence, could also have, diminished some of her power. We don't see much blood, censorship in movies, all of that in general contributes within the world of Chainsaw Man to nerf a concept. That being the case, Power should be a much stronger demon than she appeared to be in Part 2. We see that some of her displays of power are quite interesting, like the rain of swords she unleashes against Makima at the end of Part 1. This could indeed have been effective if Makima didn't have the damage transfer contract. Besides, Power was only able to use this power because she was no longer a fiend herself, but rather a fraction of the Blood Devil's power left in Denji, which was also boosted by Pochita, who greatly increased her attack power. A devil, when it consumes the flesh of a stronger devil, ends up becoming stronger as well. I like to think that the Blood Devil is quite powerful and could be even more absurdly strong depending on the state of the world in question. A world made bloody by war would definitely make Power stronger. So if she were to appear in Part 2, I'd say she would be quite favored by the context of the world at that moment. And now, yes, let's talk about Power's development. Within the story, Power went from being a super selfish and reckless devil to a younger sister who is fearful, dependent, and loving. It was a huge transformation. Her experiences with Aki and Denji were very rich, and in my opinion, she is quite underrated when it comes to character development. Not everyone talks about how much Power changed, but the truth is, everyone in that house changed. Aki had his convictions about devils shattered and reached the peak of his development, wanting to give his life and his revenge for both Power and Denji. And then, regarding Power, she learned to trust the other two boys as true older brothers, both because of her closeness with Denji, at various moments even going so far as to bathe with him without feeling any malice, and also to the point of giving him her own blood as a gesture of gratitude, which, considering she is the Blood Devil, is something very intimate and meaningful. She also became quite dependent on them after her trauma with the Darkness Devil. That event really made her humble herself and realize that she is small compared to other existing devils. Since then, she was never the same and became much more attached to Denji, especially. Not to mention that all the interactions within this group were really fun, man, as if they truly were a family with a lot of chemistry, and without a doubt, it's one of the richest parts of Chainsaw Man. Personally, I really miss those interactions, and I would say Power's peak in character development is shown in the birthday celebration she puts on for Denji. From that point on, she goes to Makima's apartment, holding a cake, looking all cute to wish him happy birthday, and well, bang. After that, she kind of dies and it's really sad and all that. But the point I wanted to get to is how she came back later using the blood she left in Denji. And then, when Makima considers sparing her if she gives Denji back to Makima, Power actively chooses to protect Denji. The old Power would have easily handed Denji over to Makima, and she even thinks about it, but the current Power would rather risk herself than just send Denji to his death. She even chose to die for that, in fact, which is one of the most beautiful scenes between the two of them. She says right there that they are partners and very close friends, and this is the peak of their relationship. They went from a really strange and troubled beginning to, later on, a kind of weird romance that wasn't really a romance, and then it turned into a true friendship, even to the point of death. Power's last request to Denji is for him to find the Blood Devil and make it become Power again. And that would be a contract. In other words, Denji is obligated to do this or he dies. And let me tell you, man, that scene happened over 5 years ago, you know? Yeah, my friend, 5 years without Power. What suffering. But anyway, let's talk now, just to wrap up, a bit about the possibility of Power returning in Part 2, or I don't know, maybe Part 3, whatever. Just like Reze, Kubeni, Kishibe, and other random characters, Power can also come back. Fujimoto seems to have a certain obsession with introducing new characters into the story like crazy, and also holding on to the old ones for as long as possible. But the fact is, we've already seen the return of several characters who had died, like Nayuta herself, the Bat Devil who showed up and died again, and even the Eternity Devil during the Aquarium event. But what if I told you that Power might have already appeared in the current Part 2 of the manga? Yeah, buddy, now you're curious, right? Can you think of anything before we continue the video? Think for a bit, I'll wait. Alright, time's up. Guys, it's time for the tinfoil hat moment. You know how the theories go around here, they're all a bit crazy, but there's a hint of logic to them. So yeah, this character right here, look. Yeah, that's right. Man, what if Fujimoto put her there as the Blood Devil? She didn't do absolutely anything against Pochita, didn't say a word, but her hat design kind of resembles the head of the Blood Devil. Her facial expression too, really crazy, really wild. Okay, I know, she could just be a regular devil, but the colors also seem to match Power's pattern in the manga, and well, we can't say anything for sure, right? But that was just a spasm of a crazy theory that popped into my head while I was rereading the manga, and man, what if that was actually Power reborn, you know? We never actually saw her dead body. Was she decapitated? She was, but maybe she's still alive, maybe that's Power and she'll show up again later, just like what happened with the Sword Devil, right? It's possible. I think so. Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, I do believe Power will come back in the manga because, man, let's remember something. She was in first place in the first popularity poll, and in the second poll, she was in third place. Power has always been in the top 3 in both polls, and I know that doesn't mean much by itself, but she's super popular. And there's still the hook of the contract, which is perfect to bring her back into the story later on. And also, Power's breast pillows ranked 25th in the second popularity poll. Yeah, that's right. And about Power, man, that's it. I just wanted to talk a little bit about Power. I know this video wasn't the best, and it wasn't very long either, but I wanted to make a shorter video here, also to thank you all. Thank you so much to everyone for the 100k, we're getting there. And man, the year is almost over. We still have a few more videos. This video here is going to be made quickly. I'm still a bit sick too, my voice is still getting better, but yeah, just a special little video to answer some things I saw on Twitter and also to say thanks. Thank you so much, you guys are awesome. Thanks for sticking around until now. Thank you so much for all the support on YouTube, and that's it guys. I'll see you in the next video, thanks.